Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Mikey Stafford here. We're going to reflect on the hurling year that was, and perhaps try and put some of the supposed ills of the game to right. And for that purpose, I've been joined by Anthony Daly and former intercounty ref Barry Kelly. How are we doing, gents?
Good, Mike.
Good stuff. Before we get on to the year that was, I think we might look ahead to next year. Dalo, there was a couple of interesting appointments, I think, since we were reviewing the All-Ireland hurling final. The merry-go-round has moved a little bit, and obviously Wexford have landed very well thought of Tipperary coach Darragh Egan to replace Davy Fitzgerald, and then you get the sense somewhat between that perhaps Tipperary were kind of outflanked a little bit, and that perhaps Egan was somebody they had perhaps in mind, and so they've kind of gone back to the future with Colin Bonner, who, no offence to Colin Bonner by any means, so I mean he was Wexford manager at a difficult time and didn't do a bad job by any means, and has done a decent job with Carlow recently enough, but it seemed to a lot of people that if Colin Bonner was going to get the Tipperary job, it would have been 10-15 years ago, not in 2021.
Yeah, I'd say, Mike, there was a lot of talk about Darragh was a contender, and I suppose, but the huge talk was that Liam Cahill would be coming back. The 2 years were up in Waterford, so that might have caught them a little bit in that. They probably, like for Darragh Egan, he probably wanted to move on. He's very well rated with Liam Sheedy and with Killadangan as well. The job he's done with Killadangan, well touted, bringing them back to their first county championship last year or so, and they've become very, very strong club there in North Tip. So he's a deep thinker in the game, and Wexford probably saw that there was a bit of a gap there. The Tip were waiting on Liam Cahill, and they made their move and they pounced, and he went there. So best of luck to him there. I think it's a great appointment for them. And then Liam Cahill gave a massive shot in the arm to Waterford hurling, I think, by saying basically that he felt he was happy where he was. He knew what he was working with, and as you said, probably Cullum. I would have, Cullum has huge experience. Obviously, as just you named out, throwing then Ballyhale, throwing other clubs. He's been throwing Fitzgibbons as well. But I suppose we would have all thought if it was going to happen, it would have happened before this for Cullum with Tip. So yeah, bit of a shock, but I think he's well capable of doing a good job. He knows all about the game and very well up with the game all the years. Like sometimes you'd say with a fella coming in late in his life, maybe that he would be gone from the cut and thrust of the game. But you're obviously Cullum with the college would especially be right up to date with tactically and all that's needed. So it just could be a good fit. We just have to wait and see. We don't know what's going to happen in Galway yet. A lot of talk. Micheál Donoghue he's on the way back. So yeah, Matty Kenny staying on in Dublin for another year probably deserves that, I think. And Barry be able to tell us what's happening in Westmeath there.
What's going on in Westmeath, Barry?
Yeah, apparently, one of Dalo's former charges, Ryan O'Dwyer, apparently was in contention, but it looks like a fellow Dublin man, Dalo would know him well from his dealings with Crokes and Ballyboden. It looks like Joe Fortune is the name on everyone's lips. Kevin O'Brien, the under-20 manager who managed Clonkill, they would actually face Ballyboden a couple of years ago in the Leinster Club Championship. He was the kind of local contender, but nothing official yet, Mikey. But I think Joe Fortune is expected now to take over the reins, and again he would have the edge on Ryan, certainly in terms of experience. Ryan has had a couple of club jobs, Longwood and County Meath, that, but obviously Joe Fortune has. Dale mentioned earlier on to me that mentioned Dublin minors, Dublin under-20s and Ballyboden, and I've spoken to a couple of guys on the Dublin scene, some of the referees actually, and were spoken very highly about Joe Fortune. So just interesting where it goes from there. Again, obviously the Galway job then obviously is, as Dale said, it looks like Mikey or Liam or Micheál is the favourite at the moment to go back in at least, anyway. So be interested to see what that'll bring about in terms of, obviously a lot of the Galway lads probably could follow Joe out the door as well. Like, you wouldn't think there's that much left in maybe David Burke, a few more of the lads there, be a lot of mileage in the clock. Like, so, the Galway job is probably the most challenging job now in terms of you need to bring in a few new faces there, definitely. And, this year obviously ended pretty badly for them.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Dalo, that, if Micheál Donoghue goes back into Galway and Colin Bonner is taking finally getting the job perhaps he would have wanted 10, 15 years ago. It almost seems like Wexford are a little bit of an outlier in that they're taking a chance on a young guy who's been a coach but not a manager at inter-county level. Do you think there is a reluctance in counties to maybe take a punt on a young guy, or a guy who only has club experience, or a guy who's only been a coach and has never been a manager? Because, Jesus, Galway's like one of the biggest hurling counties in the country, that not saying that Micheál Donoghue isn't a fine manager, obviously he won in All Ireland, but that they're going back there suggests a lack of viable candidates.
Yeah, well, we would have thought, I suppose, Jeff Lenski would be maybe one with the underage pedigree, but didn't go that well for him in the under-20s, I suppose. Nearly all this year, for all the world, would have been held over. So maybe, and I suppose if Micheál is interested in coming back, he delivered in All Ireland in 17, the first one since Searle's time, and I think it's a no-brainer for them if he's interested in going back. Why he quit in the first place would maybe put you to what has changed. There was a lot of talk that maybe there was a bit of a clash with the couple of board officials or the board or whatever. I'm not too privy to it, but have things changed sufficiently for him now to go back and say, yeah, I'm happy to take it on again. And I think Barry's right. There is probably a bit of surgery needed there, and the same with Tip. We've seen Joe gone already with Galway. We've seen Brendan Maher gone with Tip, and there'll probably a few to follow, I presume. Wouldn't like to be writing anyone's epitaph. So we'll wait and see. But there is a few lads with a fair bit of mileage, as Barry said, on the clock in both counties. Top players, like you think of Aidan Hart, as you said, David Burke, fellas like that. You think Noel McGrath, you think of Paddy Marr, so brilliant players. So we'll see what that brings and what a manager coming in. We've seen what Liam Cahill did in Waterford with making his own few changes and making statements, and they winding up in an All-Ireland final after it. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the take is there.
Yeah, and so Dalo, are you ruling out a return to inter-county scene in 2022?
I absolutely am, Mike. Yeah, I'll stay here talking about it with you, Mike. It's a lot handier sitting down the couch talking about it, I tell you.
Yeah, it's probably safe for employment prospects.
Well, we're delighted. Go on back. No,
I mentioned there that, I know a few Waterford lads live around Mullingar and that, and they'll be hugely boosted by the fact that Anthony mentioned that Liam Cattle's staying on. Obviously Liam's kind of press release was cleverly phrased in the sense that he was kind of saying that just not now, right job, wrong time, blah blah, and he'd certainly be interested in the Tipperary job maybe in a couple of years' time. But that huge boost to the people in Waterford, and with lads like Tig and Pádraig Mahoney maybe to come back, maybe Stephen O'Keefe, other teams seem to be in a state of flux at the moment. Really, you would say that Kilkenny, they're top players. Like again, we mentioned not right Daniel's obituary, but how much is left in TJ and Richie Hogan, much more can Brian get out of these lads. So Waterford are probably regarded as the second best team in the country over the last 2 years consistently, and then suddenly a highly regarded manager and Mikey along with them. It's a huge boost to Waterford. They could be now a team that could hit the ground running now in the National League and so on.
Yeah.
And Mike, just before we finish up, I suppose we got a huge lift here in Clare when the board decided to give Brian Lohan 3 more years. So, Peter Duggan is back from Australia. He's playing well for his club and things. So, huge lift around the county. And I think Clare, John Condon, I suppose, would be the one that's moving on into that thinking about a time. But he's playing very well for his club. So Clare will be fairly settled for next year. And I think that's a good move for Clare on that as well.
Yeah, at a time like this, it does seem like being settled is a good thing to be, because you look at obviously Limerick are they couldn't be more settled. But most other teams are kind of either building or they're not quite what they want to be yet, and with all that managerial change, etc. having a manager coming in with 2-3 years under his belt is definitely, there's a comfort in that.
Yeah.
Okay. You'll have noticed Rory O'Neill isn't here today. That's the circumstances beyond anybody's control, I'm afraid, because we would love to have Rory here today, because this whole podcast was his idea, and now I'm the one who's going to have to take the flak for it, as two fine hurling men get het up about Rory's suggestions. Well, he's come up with 5 rules to save the game of hurling, and if he was here, he'd have his explanation for it, but I suppose I'll give an explanation of sorts, and I'll use our esteemed guest Barry Kelly as an example. Barry refereed 4 All-Ireland finals. 2006, the score was 116 to 113. 2008, which is an outlier, which I want to come to in a second, was 330 to 113, obviously when Kilkenny blew Waterford out of the water. 2012, 322 to 311, and 2014, 217 to 214. So Barry has actually seen the evolution of hurling scoring on the first Sunday of September, shall we say. And obviously this year's final, Limerick set a record 332 to 122. And it's obviously not just All-Ireland finals. We've seen scoring trending up for a few years now, from National League games all the way through provincial championships and All-Ireland finals. Barry, so I suppose before we get on to Rory's rules, maybe just to look at to ask you about that, and that 2008 final, because it wasn't competitive. It was a complete and utter blowout. Famously, no man of the match could be chosen, so the 15 Kilkenny players shared it, or the squad shared it. Did you know at the time were you like writing in your notebook going, mother of Christ, I'm going to run out of ink here? Was this particularly unusual for you, because it's kind of become almost the norm now?
Yeah, I remember thinking, Mikey, at one stage in the game, Waterford were obviously underdogs, coming in on the basis of great win over Tip in the semi-final, but I think at one stage it was maybe 9-3 to Kilkenny. I think they had nine shots, nine points. And I remember thinking to myself at one stage, got Kilkenny going really well here, a goal here, and in a way, I think in my own head it was, we're in bother here, because it's easier to referee a game when the tight teams are close, because obviously everyone focuses on the ball, and the fear is that someone gets frustrated when. And then Kilkenny didn't get 1 goal. I think they got 2. Eddie Bennett scored 2 in a minute or thereabouts. And suddenly it was like, it really was half time. It was like, right, just get through this without some lad from Waterford. No offence, but just saying, first All-Ireland final in whatever it was, 59 years thereabouts, or 49 years time, and they're not going to cut the head of a fella here. You know what I mean? Because that was their biggest fear. The result of the match wasn't in doubt. But even looking back, Dalo stood over the 65 back in 95. I think their winning score was 113, Dalo?
113 is right, Barry, yeah.
You know what I mean? 113 wouldn't be a half-time score these days. It wouldn't, obviously Limerick this year had 318 scored. Probably 113 scored after 17-8 water break time.
Yeah.
So but one match that did strike me was, I'm sure Dalo was probably there at the time, was, remember after the kind of lockdown last year, and the first match shown on television was Clare and Limerick in the championship, and the first 3.5 minutes of the second half, Limerick scored 5 points. It was just mind-boggling. It was actually on television to watch it, it was kind of almost boring. It was just shot after shot after shot. I know that Limerick team in particular have a strategy nearly where they fully expect to have 50 shots a goal and score 2/3 of those, which wouldn't be a hugely highly successful conversion rate. That means they're going to score 34, 35 points. They're not a team that places huge emphasis on goals, although this year they certainly did. But if you score 34, 35 points, you're very hard to overcome that. And I don't know whether it's the hurlings, whether it's the sitters. Even Daly will tell you, every sitter now used nearly is a brand new one, or one that goes wide, one pair of hands on a sliotar that's perfect, just out of the factory almost, and lads leather down the field. There's no such thing now as remotely a sliotar that's worn or wet, or it's just, sliotars are very dispensable. As you see it in the program before the game, and lads are leathering sliotars into the crowd, and county boards are probably treasure up in the stand is Jesus, fitting little bag of sliotar, but it's I don't know how you might think it's a problem as such, but the scoring rates are astronomical. It's only a matter of time until some team scores 50 points in total, but whatever it was, Limerick came reasonably close this year. I'd say if they had to go 50, they would have scored 50 nearly that day. So has gone really off scale. Like now, 113 only 25 years ago when Dalo's team won 113 to win 11. I mean, off he scored 2-8 that day.
Yeah.
2-8, like, I mean, sure, any team, when you can see it, now, when there was a team with a great defence, and let's not be, the top class defenders in that team, Mike, but still 2-8 was phenomenal.
And now this isn't to hammer anybody or anything, because Dale, I think we can all agree that, well, we'll get into the rules and they do cover a lot of even what Barry's already mentioned. The skill levels and the coaching and everything, and you've probably witnessed that over the course of your own managerial career, not even your playing career. You've probably seen from when you started out with Clare to going through that, you kind of see that how the strength and conditioning, the skill, the level of skills, etc., that are there are phenomenal. And everyone can say, oh well, modern hurls, modern slitter, you know. Take someone off the street and see if they can put a modern slitter over the bar from 100 yards with a modern hurl. You won't even come close. Try it from 40 or 50. So the technology, etc., has moved on, but so have the players, and every sport has to contend with this, that, you know, people get better as we get on, and the legends of 50 years ago, 60 years ago in most sports have been surpassed because it's just the evolution of the species, as well as, you know, kind of sport becomes more professional, even the amateur sports. So just before we get into it, this is not to say that everything we see is an illusion by any means. Yeah,
well, Mike, you know, I'd say one thing there I would say you'd be saying, I know you're going to ask us about the hurley size and that, but the schlitters, and Barry's right, obviously, and we would expect big games, new balls, but I think the big thing, and I've asked a few lads that have kind of played for a long time, and they say the biggest change is in the schlitter being that little bit lighter, but the rim being gone. And what essentially the rim being gone, like, but you remember the old O'Neill's balls, Barry, you often threw them in, sure, and you'd feel the rim, you know, and that led to a bit of, you know, not as sweet striking, I'd have to say, and a bit of inaccuracy and a lot of wides, maybe, because the distance shot, I suppose, was harder to control then, because if it didn't hit clean, and I've asked a few lads about that, because, you know, there's been so many theories. The hurleys have changed a fair bit, but not massively, I don't think. I kind of used a big boss way back then, but it wasn't that, and it's still not as big as what I see now when I handle lads' hurleys and that. But I think tactics as well has played a huge role in it, of course, and the days of me hooking it up to the Sparrow, let's say, and his man was on him, and it was mano to see who'd win it. Like, now that has changed, and teams have gone defensive, and yet that would seem to be a contradiction. But it is allowing more scores from out the field, and as Barry said, doesn't bother Limerick. Like, they're quite happy with Dermot Burns, his percentages from 70, 80 yards. They're quite happy with that. That they'll, if they can pop it back to Dermot Burns or Hannon, that they'll nail it from back there. And it's just, they're bigger men as well, of course, now. They're different specimens of athletes, and might mention two of the Limerick halfbacks. We might as well mention the other one. I mean, what has he brought to halfback place since he went back there, Kyle Hayes? So I don't know. I honestly think, though, teams defensively, players are not under as much scrutiny now as to what their man scored or whatever, you know. Like that day, Barry, like we mentioned 113. Like, I'd have been so conscious as Mark and Johnny Dooley that day, like, you know, like Johnny got 5 points off me or 1-3 or something. It was going to be hard to beat him. So you had a big job to do, and you'd nearly sacrifice your game as a defender in terms of clearing ball to mark your man. Whereas I see an awful change in that now. We've wing backs bombing up the field and scoring. Cornerbacks regularly scored this year. You know, Cathal Barrett, Barry Heffernan, Niall O'Leary. We saw him regularly get the scores. Even Rory Hayes, Clare, good few chances. You know, so that wasn't there in our time. So I think that has contributed as well. So I still think we've a great game. You know, and I think we see great things in our game. Problem usually when people start whinging about things is when there's a dominant team there. And again, we have a dominant force. And I think if you took away from the great Kilkenny team, and they did get the 5, but it came back and won more after that. But took away them, well, they were there, and we all wanted to say, what could we do to change it? But other counties got close, and, you know, we saw Clare making a breakthrough then in 13, Galway 17, Waterford came very close, Dublin came close-ish, won a couple of things. You know, so it was good and even and really going into the start of the year every year. But now there people would be saying, chit-chatting to him, who's going to beat Limerick at this stage, you know. But and the rest are probably very similar. If Limerick weren't in it, or for some reason they didn't come out of Munster round robin, anyone could win it. Yeah. So that's true. The reality of the situation.
Football's in a better place now as well because the Dubs haven't won the All-Ireland. So yeah, I see you take your point. Right, let's get into these rules. Courtesy of Rory O'Neill, not me. I am his proxy here. Rule
I'd say you had a meeting about this.
Not at all. Rule 1: all puckouts, just like in football, are taken from the ground and from the 21-yard line. So Rory's explanation here is pretty soon you could have, in theory, a farcical game of ping pong with the two goalies taking shots on each other. So Dale, this comes back to the sliotar and to the rim and to the box. A modern hurl and modern goalkeeper's hurl now is like a howitzer. So this goes back to so basically the goalkeeper has to take a free when he's pucking at the ball. I guess that's what he means. So not unworked
like a sideline cut, Mikey. No,
it's unclear. He's saying take from the ground and from the 20. That'd be chaos, Barry. That would be absolute chaos if it was a sideline cut, because if it has to be taken by the goalkeeper, very unpredictable. You'd have a lot of jostling for position close to goal. How do you think that one would work?
Yeah, I'd say that one of the biggest changes in the game in the last 25 years is that if you went through and asked any lad who are the best goalkeepers of all time, they're all featuring the standard of keeping in the last 25 years has been off the scale. Go back to Fitzy, Daly Fitzhenry and Dalo's time. Even Donald Logue was a phenomenal keeper, particularly on a high ball. It's to catch a high ball. I remember watching him one day against Waterford on a wet day in Croke Park, and a ball came through a ticket of hurleys. Never took his eyes off it, made a catch that was... You don't see, without being smart, Fitzy won't appreciate this, but nearly, his mistake for Michael Glyden's goal in 95 was nearly the last big keeper mistake that led to a goal in a final. In a way, it's kind of the standard of keeping. But also, linked to that then is the puck outs. Again, there's a huge skill. You were talking about pucking the ball about 100 yards out, Mikey, but the skill in pucking the ball to a fella who will be 20 yards from where he is when you puck... Don't can introduce that now, and it's an incredible skill. It's a bit like, do you remember the Joe Canning sideline cut to Joseph Cooney in the Leinster final last year? I mean, Tiger Woods or DeChambeau won't do it in the Ryder Cup, in terms of they're hitting a static target. He hit the ball to a fella who was going to be 20 yards from where he was when he first moved, into his hand. It's just mind-boggling. So the keepers, I like to puck out. I'm not nuts about the puck out to the corner back, which obviously has crept in. Dale mentioned tactics, and lads are playing sweepers, and someone introduced a sweeper back in 2004 against Port Kilkenny and started the whole thing going. But anyway, we'll leave him out of the conversation. But anyway, poor Alan Martin got blamed for that. But anyway, I think there's a skill in the puck out, particularly when you go 60, 70 yards. Nowadays, Dale knows himself, inter-county managers, the goalkeeper has to be arguably one of the most skillful players in the team. Previously, that wasn't the case. I don't like the idea. There's more random selection area above free. It's harder to control a free, and it hit it to a lad that you're trying to pinpoint 70 yards away. So I wouldn't necessarily agree. I know they're going big distances, but there's very few goalies going. Brian Hogan from Tipperary, and he wasn't even playing with Tipperary this year, but he's a fellow capable of putting it down on the opposition 20-yard line. But most of them don't go that route. Most of them go rather for placement. So they're not actually going 110 yards of puck outs. They're hitting it 70, 60, 70, sometimes just 20 to the corner back. And then they, I think Limerick play a fantastic brand of hurling, but it's also kind of, at times, I'm sure Limerick people puck it on and it goes Sean Finn and up the line to Dermot Burns and across, then it'll break down very easily. And it breaks down, but it doesn't break down too often, in a way. So I wouldn't like the puck out to change. No, I think the puck out is a skill, and maybe if you go back to Seamus Jurek pucking it down on top of Brian Lohan's father back in the day, whatever, that was different, but I think it's a skill.
Okay. How about you, Dale? Would you like to see give the keepers a pitching wedge and see how they get on?
Yeah, well, I thought by they take it off the ground like football, so I thought he meant a sideline cut.
It's not clear. It's not clear.
Yeah, straight away I thought I'd be going to Portumna if I'm Micheál Donoghue and getting Joe Canning to go back into goal for Galway. No disrespect to Ian Murphy or whatever, but and look, I just wrote no, Mikey, and then I wrote down the 5 questions. I wrote no, Rory, thinking he'd be on with us here. I think I think you look at Nicky Quaid as well, some of the pucking out on Murphy, and of course these guys as well, great outfield players with their clubs, and huge skill involved. I like the puck. I find it fascinating to watch back the games from the high behinds, Mike, and to see the movement and the accuracy. As Barry said, like sometimes you say, how did he manage to go, 80 yards and clean into a guy's hand that has made a 20-yard run? Great skill involved and some amount of practice. So I think it should be there to stay.
I also think you'd find the workaround pretty easy. It would be a quick 1-2. The keeper finds himself in 20 yards of space instead of pucking the ball out from the small parallelogram. He's pucking it out from the 21-yard line. That'd be the cynic in me. Okay, so that's 3 goals.
If it was a free, a Rose free, like a fella getting a free out, and as Rory suggests, from the 20-meter line, then it would be going down into the square and the 2 goalies playing ping pong. So
he must be off the ground. Yeah, I think that's a bit mad too. We'll put that one in room 101. Okay.
Mikey, sorry, just on that, this is actually shown in Croke Park at the referees' meetings quite regularly. Patrick Doherty was our boss in Croke Park, but he just showed it in terms of just the skill levels, the players involved. I did a National League game in Cork, and I don't know who it was, maybe 12, 15 years ago, and I just kind of indicated to O'Neill that, and I gave him a nod. I was 70 yards out now. He was his puck out. I indicated to him that time was up. It was half time. So kind of puck out to me rather than a clash, and maybe. So I put my hand up in the air to say, like, go on and puck it to me. It's probably there, some footage somewhere. They showed it in Croke Park referees' meetings to indicate my hand didn't move. Literally, like, he absolutely put it right into the middle of my love. It was, and lucky enough, I caught the bloody thing as well, which would be embarrassing. But like, it was, it was mind-boggling. Like, I know the Ryder Cup was on this weekend, and like the postage stamp stuff, like, you know what I mean? Like a par 3, you're putting it into the cup nearly. Like, it was just, and like, the likes of him and Fitzy and Damien, they've all like redefined, a bit like football. You mentioned there, like, I mean, Niall Morgan was nearly mad at the match and they were allowed in final. He plays midfield for his club, like, he's an even dark midfielder, and I think it showed. You can't just throw the longer is the case and you throw the dodgy lad in goals, and now is the best lad nearly goes in goals. Underage in particular, you need a really good keeper at underage or you'll win no matches. Football and hurling.
True. Okay, rule 2, go to you first for this one, Dalo. You can't score from inside your own half. Self-explanatory.
Yeah, I know where he's coming from here. That if there'll be less distance scored, but I think it'd make the game a worse spectacle, Mike, because the teams that are defensive-minded, very defensive-minded, and I've no problem with it. I did it myself, as Barry indicated. I did it myself when I thought I had to. But we certainly never did it every day. We when we thought we had to, we did it. Same with Dublin, did it once, twice when I thought I had to. But I think if you can't score from inside your own half, sure, teams are just going to withdraw completely, Mike. Yeah. They're going to just say, we'll keep this tight because we'll have 8 or 9 defenders to their 6 forwards, and we'll sacrifice our own end because we'd meet them at the halfway line so they can't score before that. So again, I don't think that'll work, and I think it'll lead to even more crowding. And obviously, there's some great players. You mentioned the Limerick half-back line. You think of maybe Ronan Maher, Paddy Foley, even Diarmuid Ryan for Clare since he came onto the scene a couple of years ago. Great man to score from distance. I think there's great skill involved in that. I think if the rim came back into Schlitter, it would probably take away a nice bit of that, and it would discourage players to go for him, even because the percentage rates wouldn't be high enough. And I think the best one of all those, Diarmuid Burns, is probably in my head the best one of those. I think when John Kiley came in first, he started to curb Diarmuid Burns hitting a lot of those long ones because the return percentage-wise wasn't long enough, and let it up to work it to Cian Lynch and work it to Tom Morrissey in that kind of way. But he's back doing it again now because I think he's got so good at it, and they're quite happy for him to have a go at it. So no, not for me. I think it'll lead to certain counties completely withdrawn and saying, well, they're definitely not getting a goal anyway because they'll have to score from outside our half.
Yeah, from a referee's point of view, Barry, obviously it's just another imaginary line on the field, and you have to be looking to see, etc., etc. I can imagine from an official's point of view, that one would be a real pain in the arse.
Yeah, and I suppose like the ones that come in more in particular, Mikey, in football recently, like far more rule changing in football, really. The one with the square ball has benefited football referees and umpires and so on that change, but sometimes I forget, like the referee is the last fella consulted on these things, and there's so many different things to consider now in terms of the mark, the forward mark. And you have to bear in mind now, if these things are brought in, they're not just brought in when Clare are playing Tip in the Munster final. It also when 6 Mile Bridge are playing the Tones in a junior match down in Clare, and there's Ambrose Hagney is trying to keep an eye on it. And Ambrose Hagney is one of the fitter lads, in fairness now, but you know what I mean? I'm just throwing out a name, but like, you have good players and you have top class players and you have weaker players, and the same goes for referees. And you have to try and make sure that it can't become that, Jesus, I mean, I've got wrong myself in local football here in terms of like, the mark, was he inside the 45, outside? I think even there was a match this year in the National Football League where Rory Beggan took a kick out, he charged up the field, and the pass was given back to him, but it was a forward pass back to him, and it wasn't blown because the referee obviously. But I mean, that's free now. You can't kick a ball. I can't. I had one recently in a match last Saturday. Keeper kicked out 50 metres. The man was closed down. The man kicked it back 50 metres, and I was like, that's a free, even though the whole idea was a hand pass back. But once you pass back, like, lucky enough, I spotted, like, but the more you bring in, you have to keep in mind that you can't make it too complicated. I mean, the games themselves, particularly football, can be complicated enough to referee anyway. So hurling less so, and there've been fewer rule changes in hurling. But like trying to, and then imagine the arguments over a fella in the Ireland final striking the ball, and Herbert is hurled and he struck the ball, and was he inside the halfway line or not? Yeah. No. I agree with Taylor on that one, definitely. No.
We need VAR.
I don't think we're going to see Rory in the Rules Committee here very shortly in Croke Park. He's not doing himself many favours at the moment.
Okay, his next one has come up, and it's come up on this show before, and I made a suggestion. I can't remember who it was laughed in my face. I think it might have been Henry Shefflin. So I'll take it. But this is a fair point, Dalo. Standardised boss sizes for hurls, you don't think it's a huge issue. I personally, as a below average junior hurler, I love the new hurls. I think they're very forgiving. I don't think they make that. I haven't seen myself become a hell of a lot more accurate, but you could definitely, a bad strike is still a strike. So I do think there's something in this. But how do you get a standardized boss size when there's probably, I don't know, let's pick a number out of the sky. Say there's 300 hurley manufacturers in the country, and you've no means to police this is the major problem.
Yeah, and you said it there, Mike. And do we want to go back and see poor striking? Is that what we prefer? But or do we want to see quality balls and be able to be up in the stand and going, gee, how did he, find that man with that pass, crowd of players? But yes, Barry should have tried to bring in something there before about that, didn't they? Standardised boss.
I think the rule exists, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's something there, but sure, you couldn't. Lads would be bringing 5 hurleys, sure, and they'd be throwing them out and throwing them in, wouldn't they? And unless you have some way of measuring a lad's 4 hurleys before the game, and he was allowed 4, but then, as Barry said, bring that back to a junior match somewhere. So who's to do it then and all that? I think within reason, Barry might explain to us what is that rule, and was it in 4? I remember, I think I was managing Clare, I think, when it came in, and we were, Jesus, that'd be too big, like you can't use that kind of thing. But it didn't last long anyway for some reason.
Yeah, 13. I remember looking at a rule book a long time ago now. 13 centimeters was the requirement. Now I think keepers' hurleys was an exception, but I think an outfield player's hurley, it couldn't be any more than 13 centimeters. I think was the. I mean, as regards, like, can you imagine trying to police this? Like, I mean, poor fourth official, lad coming on a sub, over here with your tape measure, and we'll measure this. And then where are you measuring exactly from where to where? Maybe Mikey, you don't have a disservice. Maybe you're improving as you're getting older, Mikey, and you're, maybe your striking's improving. Like it.
Yeah.
It hasn't got much worse, Barry, I'd say, is the one thing I'd say. I think the suggestion I made to Henry Shefflin that got me laughed out was that you'd have a kind of you'd have like a standardized, like, it'd almost be like a template. So you'd have like a hole in a board that would be, a hurl couldn't be any bigger than this hole, or else it wouldn't go through the board, which isn't very workable either, but it might be more workable than a tape measure. But
it'd be interesting, Mikey, to see, like, in other sports, like, in golf, obviously, I don't actually play golf even, but in golf, obviously, that clubs have changed, and the shafts and the graphite, and even the club head. I don't know if there's a limit on, presume there is, but even tennis rackets. I mean, I grew up watching Bjorn Borg with a wooden tennis racket, gracefully hitting the ball across the, and now, like, Djokovic and the boys have rackets that you'd imagine that you couldn't but hit the ball with. I presume other sports that they have got regulations and rules, but very hard to enforce them, like, particularly in a sport that's played mainly in one country. And I'd say you made a very good point earlier on, like, yourself, in fairness, that the standard now, like, you look back, I'm sure Dale was the same, you look back now on games even from 25 years ago, and you're thinking, like, not just fitness wise, but the quality of play today is just mind boggling. What lads can do with a ball, the skill involved, it's not just strength conditioning, it's control and touch, and everything is just, it's just fantastic. It's never been better than it is at the moment. I certainly would think that. Not just strength conditioning, but it's skill-wise, it's just off the scale. What lads can do with the ball now, couldn't imagine Dale doing what Kyle Hayes did, could you?
Bicycle to get me back. But even football boots, Barry, think of the like, you've seen these soccer players bending a ball now. There's new, rugby players, but the boots, or even boots, I was in that trade for long enough to know that boots become a huge issue for footballers of all. So you can't really stop progress, like, I think, and I don't think they're going to get much bigger, Mike, because I've often gone into goal for a penalty or 21 and used one of Davy's hurleys inside the goal, but you wouldn't want to be carrying it around outside, like, because it's just be too slow, you're hurling with it. So I think there's a certain size they'll go to. Remember, they've got so much smaller as well now. It's very common now.
They're a lot shorter than they used to be.
Using 32s now, where we were using 36, 35.
Yeah.
It was a small hurley, like, really, that back then. So things change.
Yeah.
If you're involved, Mike, in underage coaching, I'm doing a bit here in my own club. Like, parents who wouldn't have ever hurled would ask you, like, how do you measure? And the old measure of, like, from the hip down to the, like, that's gone. Like, like Shawnee McGrath, I think, was the lad who used to use the smallest hurley, intercounty hurling. He couldn't be hooked no matter what because he had a wand in his hand nearly. But now it's, it's used to 32, like, big, strong men, but they're using hurls that just literally much smaller, and yet they're still striking at a mile. And the hurls that
except for Patrick Horgan, of course.
Yeah,
it's got 232 sellotaped together, I think. But we might as well mention this here since we're talking about technology, equipment data. You do seem to have an issue with the modern slitter, then, do you? Or you think that could be the root of a lot of the issues here?
Yeah, I think that's probably the reason. It's got lighter, it's probably more aerodynamic, and the rim is gone virtually. Be it a Cummins, be it an O'Neill's, be it an O'Kelly, I don't want to be leaving out any of the slitter makers, but the rim is gone virtually. And Don Logue used to often tell us as well that he'd be paring away rims, and he'd have all the old tricks, Don Logue, and he used to have the old big wet ball then to throw out for the opposition penalty if he got away with it as well. So look, and even I think before Munster final, one of the Clare backroom staff was known to have thrown Anthony Nash's slitters, the whole lot of them, into the crowd down in Thurles.
That's right.
But he'd the misfortune of telling one of his mates he was going doing it. So your man taped it, and it kind of got out there. It was a bit embarrassing for Clare at the time. But actually, look, it was more of a kind of out tricks. But yeah, I think the slitter bring back a bit of a rim, and it was less certainty. Wasn't less skill because it's probably harder to control. So, yeah, but will they change that back either? I don't know. I don't know that. But that would be a lot of the reason for me for the scoring rates going up as much as they have.
Yeah.
Mikey, on that, and again, Dale kind of alluded to that there. I did my only Munster final in 2005 down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Tip got a penalty after about 15 minutes. And Owen Kelly was obviously going to take it. But Of course, Dermot ended up with, I think the ball was actually in the back of his shorts, which he kind of got his hand on the ball and he put it in the back of his shorts, and the Tipperary lads didn't know where the ball was. And one of my umpires reached in and picked out a brand new sliotar and pegged it out to me. I was going bananas. I was like, I didn't know, didn't play hurling at a high level. I was like, this is a brand new sliotar, Owen. What's the problem? Like, you're going to hit this. I think he was no way. He wanted the ball that had been originally used. Again, got to do with the rim on the ball and the fact that maybe a bit of spin on it. And I couldn't figure out. I was like, there's a flipping, nearly take the wrapping off it. Brand new sliotar for you. What more do you want? Not a wet, heavy sliotar. But I remember he absolutely went. Now, Owen wasn't a fella who would ever go berserk with a referee. He was a gentleman. But he really, he wasn't happy. And actually, remember that it was saved, the shot was saved. Don Logan, whoever else in the line, Wayne Sherlock or someone, saved it. And I'd say it was nearly psychological as much as anything else. But I think Dermot had the bloody ball in the back of his shorts all along. I think I remember discovering that later on. But anyway, I wasn't worried about him.
No, there was no one. There was none of the tip forwards really going taking it out of his arse. No, you know, leave it.
He can have it. He can have that one. Okay, rule 4, and you'll have to excuse. This must be Rory's. This must be Cork Street League lingo here or something. Bash balls have to be pulled on first time. Does anyone know exactly what that means? I know he wants to get rid of rucks here, but bash balls, that means that, like, if the ball is on the ground and it's not in anybody's hand and there's two guys competing for it, you have to try and pull on it, as Dalo would have been de jour in your day.
I thought he meant a clash ball, we'd call it, which if Barry decides there's a shamazel, you know, and his ball is going over, he's in his rights to blow the whistle and
throw
it away, and two players and throw it in. You know, so often now the players, how far are they meant to be back, Barry, if you throwing the ball?
13 metres.
It's very hard to enforce it again, like, isn't it?
Completely. But actually, referees are more reluctant now they actually try and let the play develop, because by stopping it, you create a bigger problem, because then everyone gathers in. And of course, then the throw ball, it's almost like you're entitled to pull with a little bit of, you know, a bit more latitude than maybe you would. And then the lad sticks his foot out to kind of almost guarantee himself a free, takes him for the team. You know, nowadays nearly, no, you put your foot out and your man's going to pull, it's no free. And referees try and avoid those kind of clash balls if they can. Eventually some lad will move it out somewhere. But of course, the other thing too, they're so good at now is getting the ball up into the hand in the middle of the ruck. Like, I mean, I think it's one of the greatest skills. I think Brian Coley was quoted as saying that it was the most important skill, because whoever has the ball, you dictate everything.
Yeah.
So it is like the idea of, the idea, like, we're trying to get, Rory's right. I don't like the clash ball. I don't like it. It just creates more problems. Like, it's just a nightmare. Something that gets pulled on, and then it's just, everyone gathers around. As Dale said, like, 30 metres, you can't get them back 2 metres. Same in football. So often often happens is a guy not in the throw-in catches the blade thing, and it's a foul then, because he's not allowed to catch it.
Yeah.
So, like, it causes more problems. And we look, even among referees' meetings, to be like, lads, if you can, don't throw it in twice. Start the game and start the second half. That's it.
Yeah. Well, I think Mike as well, he's probably alluding to it not liking the rucks, basically, right? So, why are the rucks there? Like, look, in my day, if a ball set up for you, you could let rip on it. Like, you know, and if you got a good contact, you'd get a good 30, 40 yards out of that pull. You know, you'd have it maybe a foot off the ground. And look, I'm looking up the field ahead of me then. Maybe there's probably one midfielder, the two of them would hardly be always there in front of you. But there's probably 3 clear half forwards, 3, we say, off-free half backs for all the world. And again, now you see, with teams having 4 and 5 across the half back line, there's no advantage in your half back line now pulling on the ball. Hardly even midfielders. There's a small advantage maybe in a half forward. Who knows? There's a 2-on-2 inside and he moves it in quickly. And we see some great scores still out of that. But I like, we had great lads when I went to Dublin now, good tradition. I think of Stephen Heine. Heine was great, tough wing back, and Heine loved to just go and let rip on the ball, and he was good at it. And I just had to say, Stephen, there's no point, like, and we'd be doing the video clips, and he'd made great contact up to a loose, you know, Wexford man or a Galway man, and like that's why it's gone from the game. And you meet a lot of the older generation. I'm creeping up with those as well. We all are, I suppose. But ground hurling is gone now, and you know, so There's a huge rule change about where teams are allowed to set up, that they have to have 6 forwards inside their half or something like that. Then that's not going to come back, unfortunately. And a pity in one way, because it was a great skill to watch. And there was nothing like, let's say, a wing back whipping on it. And I often remember it happening. Let's say maybe Liam Doyle would whip on it and it go up to our half forward line and fingers would just turn and lace on it again. And he'd hit it again and it was inside on top of Conor Clancy or the Sparrow, literally really quickly. And it was really effective. And no one better at it than Offaly. We'll all remember that you'd see Pilkington whipping on it. Go back, John Troy, Adrian Fenlon, Wexford, and someone else, Larry Murphy.
Remember, Gerard Coughlin with a hurl probably the same size, and Gerard wasn't a big man. Yeah. And Gerard Coughlin's hurl was probably, half the size of him, and he would absolutely lacing balls all around the place. But as you said, it's a hit and miss kind of strategy, and because now defenders outnumber forwards, chances are it's going to end up in a defender's hand, and he lamps it down the field to the lad who's on his own. He pops it over the bar, and then the manager is roaring and shouting at him to bloody bend his back and pick it up like.
Yeah. I was at a football game there, Mike. Just a quick one. I was at a football game, local club here, Shannon Gales, and they were playing their disappointing defeat, but they still got through. But it's gone very tactical football, way worse than hurling, obviously. And we're trying to sort out the deals of hurling here. But Jesus was a fella beside me, and he wasn't older than me, but he just kept roaring for the full game nearly. Well, I moved away a bit at half time. But he kick in the ball. But then sure you glanced forward at the forward line and there was 1.5 guys because the other fella was out about 25 yards. One fella was on the edge of the square and there was 4 defenders back there. So, it's just tactical. That's what it is. And people have to understand that. It's folly just kicking the ball or pulling on the ball up to where it's a 4-2 situation, unfortunately.
Yeah, you see, if you're an advocate or if you love a bit of ground hurling, there's always junior hurling because it's more about getting the ball out of your own half or getting it. You're not really too worried about who it's going to because it's not going to come back too quick either. So, for all you connoisseurs of ground hurling out there, just go watch a few junior hurling matches. You'll see plenty of ground hurling. It won't be John Troy standard, but it won't be Owen Quigley, but it'll be all right.
And plenty of, as Rory said, bash ball.
Plenty of bash balls, yeah. Emphasis on the bash. Okay, Rory's last rule is not off the wall because it's one that gets mentioned quite a lot, and it's the idea, Barry, of 4 points for a goal. This one's been around for a long time. 4 points for a goal. You've probably had people who have said 5 points for a goal. Basically, the goal is too devalued because, as we've discussed at the top, points tallies have gone through the roof. So make a goal more attractive to score. It becomes the game. It would fundamentally change how the game is played. You would have to imagine.
Yeah, and I'd be as traditional as they come when it comes to maybe in life in general, maybe conservative. But I had this discussion with a guy locally recently, and he kind of brought in the rugby concept that we were, particularly maybe myself and maybe Daly to a certain extent, grew up with 6 nations or 5 nations was back then, and Keith Crossan would score a try and it was worth 4. And the rugby obviously is a good example in the sense that a try and a conversion is worth 7. So it's like nearly 3 penalties to cancel it out. Rugby has its own difficulties now in terms of how the game has changed and so on. It's a bit like hurling, but I think it's one that. Look, we better give Rory one of these at least, otherwise he'd be totally depressed. We better concede one of them. We haven't conceded any so far. But I do think there's merit in it. I think and quite often you see a game now where a team scores a goal, but the other team, I suppose to their credit, replies unbelievably quickly with maybe 2 quick fire points. And suddenly it's like the goal and the buzz and the lift it's given, it's almost like dissipated immediately. Jesus, they're getting 2 points there in 30 seconds and suddenly didn't even get a kick from the goal even. So the idea that, a lot of it would change the game, as you said, in every way in terms of even scoring, records, all of these things, but nothing still beats. A goal brings a level of excitement, net being rattled. I don't know how close it is, but we've moved on, Mikey, I suppose, from originally where a goal was won a game for you, and how many points the opposition scored back in the early days of the GAA. You win a match, 2 goals to 8 points, and you were the winner because you got all goals. But I do think the rugby, certainly worked in rugby. So yeah, I think it's worth exploring maybe seeing it at underage or at certain levels, maybe your beloved junior level maybe.
It doesn't matter to me. I don't score anything, so it doesn't really matter. But Dalo, like we talked about, the fact that you know inside lines are 1-2 players, or like there's the ball is sailing over like sometimes the most talented players on the field are the inside forwards, and they're not getting as much ball as they used to when you were pulling on it from the half forward line, the half back line. This would be a way to probably see inside forwards get more ball, which for fans and for coaches, for teammates, is probably a good thing.
Yeah, the Nemo Rangers man made 5 points, obviously, for us today. But this is the one I'd actually wrote down merit in this. Yes, and yeah, I think Barry has hit the nail on the head. I was thinking maybe you could bring it in as the second goal would be worth 4 points, and maybe any subsequent goals worth 4 points. Might be an interesting way of a team to push on and keep going for goals and keep trying to create goal chances. And definitely, yeah, you even look at the difference in soccer as well. I know they don't give 2 goals for a goal, but they give 3 points for a win. We all remember the days of the 2 points and the 1 point, and teams were going away from home and playing for draws, and quite happy, and they weren't losing much ground. So yeah, I do think the goal is the hugely exciting bit of our game. It's the thing that sets the stadiums rocking, and to give it more, I would go with this actually. I would trial it in next year's National League if they were willing to do something as volcanic as that in the GAA, which we know they usually don't. But yeah, I thought even if they wanted, say first goal 3 points, any subsequent goals 4 points for them. It would keep up that level of we can get back into this with a goal here, rather than kind of take your points all the time and it being a bit monotonous at times with some of the easy points we're seeing in the last while. But so yeah, I go with Rory on this one, Mikey. I think there's a lot of merit in it, as Barry has said, and it should be looked at. I really do think that. Okay. Even though this year we had a fair old year of goals now. This year, we got great goals as well, and as you said earlier, Barry, like Limerick seemed to really change the tactic and put emphasis on goals, and any time they got to goal in to drive on immediately afterwards, and there was a change from Kylie and Kinnerk on that front. We got some great goals in 2021, so hopefully that trend will continue. But I wouldn't mind seeing that trialled definitely during the league anyway.
Okay, if we're ripping up the manner of scoring, then I have one suggestion, because it just popped into my head when we were dismissing Rule 2. You can't score from inside your own half. How about, Barry, for a point scored from inside your own 65, say, you get 2 points? Because then you're going to have less chance of a player of the opposition team standing off your Kyle Hayes or your Dermot Burns and allowing them to shoot, and you'd actually, it would reward the skill, but would also make the opposition team less likely to allow it happen.
Mikey, remember Dalo wrote down no. Right?
Rory's taking a lot of flack here.
The reason why, because remember a few years ago there was a kind of a campaign that a sideline could be worth 2 points, and for a while it got a bit of traction. You're thinking this could actually come in, but what's the difference between? Joe obviously brought to a new level, but a sideline cut from 70 yards, fantastic piece of skill. But it's more skillful than, remember when you reference Owen Quigley and that incredible score he got at the Leinster final back maybe 12, 15 years ago, and where do you draw the line that at a piece of skill that's it's a beauty in the eye of the beholder and all that, so I would think that, but I do think because the standard of goalkeeping is so good now, people love melees around the goal and lads going for shots. Remember Brendan saving all the shots from the Kilkenny lads back in whatever it was, 2003, I think at this stage. But if you had lads going for, you'd probably have more saves then, because the standard of keeping is so good, So I think Dale's right. I think we trial this. It's some aspect of some, I don't know whether it's not say colleges or third level or whatever, but definitely trial it. Something, the usual, the Walsh Cups and the Keogh Cups and the Waterford Crystal and all those, maybe, and see how it works, because it's nothing beats, people love seeing goals scored, and 50 and 60 points a game can get a little bit, monotonous in a way. We are limited what we can do. The golf is on tomorrow, but the course can be set up in any way so that, it can suit the big hitters or not suit the big hitters, and the rough can be long and it can be short, and pin positions can be more tricky. So that's how they deal with it in golf courses. You can't change the dimensions of a pitch, obviously. You can't change the goalposts and you can't change the pitches. Pitch is a pitch, and that's it. Can't be longer than 145 metres, and so.
Okay. All right, well, I'm glad I got shot down.
Have to even cut the grass now, Bern. There was a time where the grass to be left go, all right.
It wasn't cut in 2006, Dale, when I refereed the final. It certainly wasn't cut. But anyway, we might edit that out, Mikey, possibly. But anyway, it definitely wasn't cut. The course wanted it nice and short, and it wasn't short.
I don't think we need to cut that out. No way.
I'm actually surprised, Mikey, that Dale referenced soccer there, because after the 2 weeks Spurs have had now, I'd say he won't mention it again.
Oh no.
We won on penalties last night, straight to penalties. That was another rule change, no extra time.
Yeah.
Good rule.
See, rule changes can be good.
That's really fun now. Matches, no replay, straight to penalty shoutouts.
Yeah.
So there you go. Some rule changes are good, but unfortunately for Rory, 4 of his 5 were not deemed good. It's a shame he couldn't have been here today, and it just thoughts with Rory today. So we'll leave to that. Thank you very much, Barry. Thank you, Anthony. And listen, we'll probably come back and do another podcast around Congress, because some of us are mad for that stuff, and we can't be helped. We'll catch you all again soon. Thank you to the lads. Goodbye.
Crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.